Welcome to Crosstalk Solutions. My name is Chris, and today I wanted to take you guys on a little tour of a small enterprise network, or I guess a medium-sized network that I built for a client, and this is going to be built on the UniFi platform. So that's kind of the interesting thing about it. I have not done a network of this size on UniFi before, and prior to the release of like 5.3.8 of the UniFi software, I wouldn't have felt comfortable putting a UniFi deployment of this size out there in the world. I just didn't think it was quite up to snuff yet, and there's a lot of things that you can do with the edge router / edge switch line of products that you can't do with UniFi. So I wanted to go over the network that I set up, talk about the VLANs, talk about the fiber connections between the devices, and also sort of go over the obstacles that I ran into and the options that I had to decide upon, and some stuff that I had to overcome as part of this network. And like many network projects, it was a work in progress. So there's things that I would do differently if I were starting the project today, and there were things that I started one way and had to sort of evolve into a different way of doing things because of various situations. So let's go ahead and go through all of that stuff. But first and foremost, let's go to my desktop here, and you guys can see a Visio of the network that I set up. Now, this is a network that is being set up for a retirement home, and what they wanted, they basically had 3 separate network closets throughout the retirement home, and in each network closet, they wanted fiber connectivity as well as these devices hooked together, the 48-port switches hooked together, and they also wanted to be able to have a little bit of extra capacity in there for future growth. So let's just go over the equipment first of all. In the first network closet, we've got a usg-pro. This is where their internet connection is going to terminate. In this case, it's Comcast Business. The usg-pro then goes over to a Edge Switch 16 XG1. That's got 10 SFP plus fiber ports and 12 SFP plus fiber ports and 4 gigabit Ethernet ports. From there, and then this sort of setup that I'm going to talk about now is duplicated in the 3 locations. So we've got the XG, the Edge Switch XG, then we've got the Edge UniFi Switch 48, and then another UniFi Switch 48. So basically these are sort of 3 devices that are stacked. They are fiber connected between the 3 closets, and then each closet has an Edge Switch XG and 2 UniFi Switch 48s. In the mix also are a total of 26 access points that are going to be spread throughout the building, and a cloud key. Okay, so the first thing you're probably going to ask is, Chris, why UniFi? Why would you choose UniFi for this deployment? And I've had this question a lot. It's the Edge Switch versus UniFi, discussion, right? The Edge router versus USG, the Edge switches versus the UniFi switches, and UniFi product line has come a long way. And I get this question a lot from people, Chris, I see that you're doing a lot more work with UniFi. Does that mean that you only use UniFi now? Are you recommending UniFi for everywhere? And the answer is absolutely not. So the answer is I look at each individual situation. I look at the customer's need, I look at the customer's budget, and I take all of the factors and I say, okay, well, is this going to be better for UniFi, or is this going to be better for the Edge Switch / Edge Router line of products? In this case, it was better for UniFi for one main reason, and the main reason is that this retirement home, I'm located in Oregon, this is located in Texas, and they don't have an IT person competent enough to manage this equipment locally. Okay, so that's why I opted to go with UniFi for this deployment, is because I'm going to be the guy managing this thing if they ever need changes, and UniFi lets me manage it a lot easier than having to coordinate with someone on site to get like team viewer access to one of their computers, and then from there I have to manage the stuff. So I mean, it really boils down to my time, and basically it's a lot easier for me to be able to hop in and fix something whenever, I mean late at night or on a holiday or whenever, as opposed to having to actually schedule time and figure out a good time to work with someone and then talk them through, okay, this is how you download the TeamViewer client, okay, now I need your 9-digit ID, right? So all of that stuff is just easier for me to do UniFi, and the customer the price was about the same, and the customer, was basically going with my recommendation. Okay, so then the second question you might ask is, all right, Chris, well, I see that you've got all this UniFi equipment, then how come you have edge switch XGs in the mix as opposed to the UniFi switch XGs? And that's another great question. And that's something that if I were starting this network today, and I were going to be building it today, and it was a brand new project, I would have done the UniFi switch XGs, the UniFi fiber switches instead. Now, why didn't I do that in this case? Quite simply because when I started this project, and when I actually ordered all the equipment, spec'd everything out, and got it ordered, it was before UniFi released 5.4.9 software for the controller, right? And so they didn't have support for the UniFi switch 16XG until 5.4.9. I think it was in beta, right? So I think the product was out, but it wasn't quite supported yet. And when I bought everything, I didn't know if that was going to be a supported product anytime soon. Plus, it was brand new, which is sort of, bleeding edge. And I don't necessarily want to put a customer that's in Texas on the bleeding edge equipment when I'm here in Oregon, right? So anyways, again, if I had to do it again today, I probably would have gone for the UniFi fiber switches, but they weren't actually available when I put all of this together. So I went with the straight up edge switch XGs, and again, that's just for sort of the layer 3 connectivity between all of these closets and between all of these devices. So ultimately it actually works out fine, and I don't expect that I'm going to have to get in and do much configuration on these edge switches, the fiber switches, in the future. Most of the configuration that I'm going to have to do is on the access points, maybe on the guest network, stuff like that. So I basically set up the edge switches so that all of the ports are just trunk ports, and they sort of filter all VLANs back and forth between the usg-pro and the UniFi switch 48s. Okay, so you can see here I've done a lot of detail work. This is part of any project, is making sure that it's well organized, making sure that it's very easy to follow. I'm not going to be in Texas installing this, so the people that are installing it need to look at this map and say, okay, I see what plugs in where, and it's going to be very easy for them to set it up, even if they're not very technical. And actually, as a matter of fact, I think now you guys kind of have an overview of what the network looks like. I have some of the equipment set up right here. I don't know if you're picking up the audio of these the UniFi Switch 48, which is kind of loud. But I'm going to flip the camera around, and then I'm going to work and show you and point out the different aspects of these devices from the front side. So let's go ahead and switch over to that now. Okay, so here we have a look at one of the stacks, minus one of the 48-port switches. I didn't want to hook everything up because this thing draws a ton of power, so I had only portions of this network hooked up at a time. But here's the UniFi Pro, or the USG-pro. We have a LAN port here. You can't really see the labels that much, but everything is labeled as much as I possibly can. The reason that we label, of course, is to keep everything nice and organized and make it very clear what gets plugged in where. So we've got a WAN port here. This is going to be their Comcast business connection. And one thing that I was a little bit disappointed about is that if you look here, you've got WAN port 1 that connects over to this SFP over here, and you've got WAN port 2 that connects over here to this SFP here. Now, I understand that a lot of providers are now doing fiber internet and all that, but how come there's no ability to do LAN SFPs into something like the Edge Router XG 16XG? I really wanted to be able to do fiber between this device and this device, and it doesn't seem that that's possible with the UniFi product line. Now, whether that's possible with the Edge Router Pro, I actually don't remember. I'm not sure if you can do that or not. Okay, so moving on though, we're going to have Ethernet WAN, Ethernet LAN. Again, that's fine. Not what I would like, but it's fine. Okay, so then let me get my access point out of the way here. These are all uap-ac-pros, by the way, that I ended up going with for the access points. Coming into the Edge Switch 16XG, we've got all of these ports. Now, these are all 100% trunk ports. Okay, so I used for the SFP Plus modules these modules from 10G-Tech. Now, you notice I've got a bunch of extra ones here, and the reason is they, in the middle of the project, the people doing the wiring for the building switched the type of fiber they were using. So originally, everything was going to be LC to LC multi-mode fiber for the like the 10 gig connections between the closets. After I ordered everything and after I actually already had the equipment in here, they decided to tell me, oh, we couldn't get the 10 gig, we couldn't get the multi-mode fiber for whatever reason, shortage or something like that. So they switched to single mode fiber. So I have 2 single mode fiber SFPs here. This is for the connections between the XGs. If you see over here, those yellow cables go to the additional XGs here and here. There's the 3 XGs. And then this orange cable here is the multi-mode fiber, which is going to be the cross connections between the XGs and these switches here. And again, I've factored in for future capacity. If they do want to add additional 48-port switches, they just need to put in additional SFPs, and they're good to go. Okay, so also one thing to take a look at, I know if you guys follow Willie Howe's channel, he mentioned this, but these are some multi-mode patch cables that I already had. And then when I had to switch it out to the single mode fiber patch cables, let's see if I can bring these a little bit closer so you can see. I went with the BeyondTech cables, and as you can see, they are much better quality, much thicker cables than these orange ones. So I like them a lot, so definitely check out the BeyondTech. And as far as connecting or interconnecting these switches with fiber, it can be pretty confusing because, you know, now Ubiquiti has just come out with their own line of SFPs, but really the key to SFPs is just to make sure that you have the type. So in this case, these are LC connectors, right? So the type of connector and then the type of fiber. So mostly it's going to be 10 gig or 1 gig. And then the type of connector, in this case, these are LC connectors. They look like this here. So these are LC connectors. So this is LC to LC, 10 gig, and then the type of fiber, which is either going to be multi-mode or single mode. So just kind of keep that in mind. And I thought that these 10G-Tech, let's see if I can focus in on that, 10G-Tech SFPs, these actually worked very, very well for me for both 1 gigabit connections, 10 gigabit connections, and the multi-mode and the single mode fiber connections. So 10G-Tech worked very well, and they make SFPs specifically for Ubiquiti. So now, why didn't I buy the actual Ubiquiti SFPs? Well, they just weren't available. So that just boils down to that. No one had them in stock, and so I had to buy third-party SFPs for this deployment. Okay, so all of the ports on this guy here are just trunk ports. So all the VLANs that are created in UniFi originate out of this usg-pro, and then also filter down through the 48-port switches, and it's just straight up trunk ports through here. Okay, so we get down to the actual 48-port switch. The way that I set this up is ports 1 and 2 over here on all of these switches are management ports. Okay, so those are where you can plug in to actually manage the network and get access, untagged access to 192.168.1.0/24. That's the management VLAN. All of the rest of these ports are standard ports until you come down to the access points. And the access points have the guest network also built into them. So the guest VLAN travels through on the access points. Anything you plug into any of these other ports is just going to get on the regular LAN. So access points have access to the regular LAN. I'm sorry, the access points are homed in on the management LAN so that this device, the access point, gets a 192.168.1 IP address. And then it also has VLAN tagging for the regular LAN, VLAN 10, and the guest network LAN, VLAN 20. So that's what's different about these 6 ports. And of course, I put this little sticker to indicate that access points go into the last 6 ports. Again, then we've got our multi-mode fiber connection over to the XG, and that is 10 gigabit multi-mode fiber. So let's take a look back in UniFi, and I will show you some additional stuff about how this is set up in the actual UniFi controller. Okay, so back at my desk here now, I realized as I was going through that last little bit that I really didn't talk to you guys about the VLANs and how I set up the VLAN. So I'm going to start there. Basically, this system has 3 different networks. Well, it's got a management VLAN, which is the sort of native LAN. That's considered VLAN ID 1. And I put that in green here. So the management LAN is 192.168.1.0/24. And then I created the first VLAN, VLAN 10, and VLAN 10 is where most of the devices will go. So all of the computers and stuff that are in the network will go into VLAN 10. And finally, I created VLAN 20, which is a guest Wi-Fi network. VLAN 10 is 172.16.0.0/16. So that's way more IP addresses than this customer needs, but I locked down the DHCP range to 172.16.1.1 through 172, oh, that's a typo, 16.2.254. Then we have our guest Wi-Fi at 192.168.0.0/24, and as part of the guest Wi-Fi network, I bandwidth limited everything, and I also secured it by using guest policies in UniFi. So let's take a look at that next. Let's go over here to UniFi. Okay, so here we are in UniFi, and why did I choose to set up the VLANs this way? Basically, you've got your management VLAN, that's for actually configuring the system. It's what the IP addresses of the access points are going to be. So the access points get an IP address in the management VLAN, and then they are passing traffic on the main and guest network VLANs. If you want to plug into any of the equipment, you have to plug into the appropriate ports in order to get management access. So that's any of the XG ports or the first 2 ports on the 48-port UniFi switches. And it's just sort of best practices to set it up that way. Now, of course, in everything IT, there's a million ways to skin these cats, right? And the joke I like to say is, how many IT guys does it take to screw in a light bulb? Well, it takes 10. It takes 1 guy to actually screw in the light bulb, and then it takes 9 guys to talk about how they would have done it differently, right? So that's basically what we're talking about here. For me, this works very well. Management VLAN that can be secured and locked down so that it's only accessible through certain ports on the switches, and then when you plug anything into any of the other ports, you're on the main VLAN, but you also have the guest VLAN tagged. On the access point ports, however, and we can see that by going over here to devices, clicking on our USG configuration, networks. We can see that this one is, wait, where is that? Configuration, is it in networks? No. Switches, configuration, networks, VLANs. Here we go. Okay, so this is how I set it up. So ports 1 and 2 are the management ports. They're basically trunk ports. All VLAN traffic passes with VLAN 1 as the native untagged port. Then we have all of the rest of these ports, and these are configured as standard, what I call standard. And standard is a port setting. If we edit this here, we can see that it's basically the native network is the LAN. So the VLAN 10 is the native network. And then I have guest net Wi-Fi as a tagged network on those ports. So basically, if you plug into any ports 3 through 42 on this switch, you're going to be on VLAN 10 untagged by default. Okay, and then finally, and sorry if this is a little bit all over the place, guys, but I don't have any script for this stuff. I just kind of walk through this as best I can here. And then finally, we've got the management LAN only ports. And let's see what else. I guess that's about it. Okay, so let's take a look at a few other things here. Here's my dashboard. We can see all of my, statistics. Here's the map. So if you are setting up UniFi for any sort of serious business environment, really good idea to utilize the map. So this is a layout of the property where this is going to be installed. We can see all of the access points scattered around the property. There's actually 24 on this map, and then they have 2 spares that I also configured for them. And it allows you to set the coverage. Now, we don't have any of these devices on right now, but it allows you to show and set the coverage of these devices on the map so that you can kind of get an idea of the radius of the 2.4 gigahertz and 5 gigahertz coverage in UniFi. In this case, For most of these access points, I set the transmit power to medium on 2.4 gigahertz and the transmit power to high on 5 gigahertz, and that kind of gave me the best looking amount of overlap throughout this entire map. When you're setting up access points, it's always a good idea to set the channel manually and to set the transmit power manually. If it's the only access point in the area, you can just set the transmit power to high. But in this case, I didn't want a lot of cross interference, so I made sure that I staggered the channels, both on the 2.4 gigahertz and 5 gigahertz networks, and I tuned down the power appropriately for each of these access points so that they shouldn't interfere with each other very much at all. Okay, let's see what else we have here. Devices, not much to see here. Clients, not much to see here. Insights, we don't care. Okay, let's do this. I'm going to run a speed test. So let me bring up a command prompt. And we're going to run a speed test across. Oh, one thing I did actually want to show you guys. If you are connecting 10 gigabit fiber, you click on my switch, for instance. It's a little difficult to see, but it shows up as a white linked connection in UniFi. So green, you can see here, 10100 is this amber color. Green is 1 gigabits. White is 10 gigabits. So you can see right here, this port on this edge switch, UniFi switch, excuse me, is white. And that means that that is a solid 10 gigabit connection. Now, I don't have a way to test 10 gigabit, but I will run a speed test anyways, and you can see, or you should see, that I will at least max out the 1 gigabit NIC that I have in this computer here. So let me get my laptop going on the other side. I'm going to set up iPerf as a server on my laptop, which is connected to the UniFi switch, and then my computer here is connected to the Edge Switch XG. Okay, so I actually have my laptop plugged into one of the other XGs, so we're going from my computer into one of the XGs, single mode fiber over to a secondary XG, and then that is where we're running our speed test. So we're going to say iPerf 3-C 192.168.1.137, and I have my laptop listening on that IP address. So here we go. Okay, so start off a little slow, but we've bumped up. We're maxing it out right at about 840 megabits per second or so here. So yeah, 823 megabits per second average. Let's go ahead and run it again. Yep, there we go. So the second time around, 833 megabits per second, which again is probably about the maximum that my computer's network interface will do, or perhaps my laptop's network interface, which is actually a USB 3 network card on the other side. So still pretty good. 833 megabits per second for a client is going to be more than enough, especially in a retirement home. Old folks don't move that fast, so they don't need that kind of speed. I'm just kidding. Okay, so that's a good look at this enterprise or medium enterprise network. Like I said, this is a system that's going to be good for probably about 200 devices or so, maybe up to 300 when you factor in all the Wi-Fi. This will be a very solid network for this customer. Now, again, are there things that I would have done differently? Yes, there were, and a couple things that I hope I've explained to you. Some of them were in my control, some of them were outside my control. Again, if I were buying this today, I would use the UniFi fiber switches instead of the Edge Switch fiber switches, just to make the whole infrastructure UniFi. I would also, hopefully, if I was doing it again today, I would have availability, there would be availability for the Ubiquiti SFPs, although these G-Tech SFPs have actually worked really, really well, so I'm really happy with these. The price on these was really good, and they worked very well. No problems with the G-Tech SFPs or SFP Plus modules at all. And then, yeah, it's simply a matter of getting everything documented. I mean, for a network like this, that's typically the hardest part. But one thing that I like about building a network from scratch, so this is a new building, right? And we're putting in this network from scratch. There's nothing that exists there today. The nice thing about that is that I have the opportunity to build this from scratch and build it right and document everything, get the VLANs set up properly. It's much easier to start from scratch and build a network than it is to come into a network that's already been established and then try to make changes or work with however many previous IT admins have made changes to that network. You got to sort of work within what they've set up for you, and maybe there's documentation, maybe there's not. So it's a little bit more difficult when you're coming into a situation. One more thing that I wanted to show you, and one thing that I think is really, really nice about these, about the Ubiquiti devices is, believe it or not, the packaging. All right, so I guess just a quick tip for anyone that's going to be setting up a network like this: utilize the packaging as part of your documentation. So let me show you what I mean here. Okay, so here's what I mean. I'm on my external mic, so hopefully you guys can see me, hear me okay. These are about to get shipped out, right? So I'm done with this project, and I just need to box everything up and ship everything out. Here you can see all of the boxes of stuff that I've got, all the access points right here, XGs, usg-pro. But check out the box. The box has a really nice big picture of the devices on the front of it. So I took a Sharpie and I basically wrote down all of the connections, right? So this port goes there, this port goes there, and I did that on every single box, right? So you can see each box is fully labeled and ready to go to the customer. Very simply, that one goes there from ISP, there's the WAN port, and then the LAN port goes to the first fiber switch. Whoa, focus. There we go. So there you have it, just a quick tip, especially if your customer is remote to you, you can utilize the box itself for additional documentation. And documentation is absolutely one of the most important parts of any project like this. Whether you're talking about FreePBX or networking project or most anything in IT, documentation is key to success. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did enjoy this video, please give me a thumbs up. If you'd like to see more videos like this, please click subscribe. My name's Chris with Crosstalk Solutions, and thank you so much for watching.